So the final session that we want to do, because we had already had 6 different sessions with in total like 8 different speakers already. So a lot of information has passed in the past hours today and yesterday. So the idea of this session is that Cris and I will just or Molly will go over the recap of those sessions, and then we will sort of give us our 2 cents on it, what we think is most interesting, to sort of give you like an overview of the whole thing. And then at the end, we will sort of also try to bring that together and see, okay, what does it mean for the future? So we have on the session, we have Cris Wildermuth. We know each other already for quite some years now. So we never met in person, always online. So we did more sessions together. And I invited Cris because first, she's an amazing person with an amazing knowledge. But she brings together 2 interesting things. So first thing, she's a professor or now at Barry University, before it was Drake. And she's teaching things for corporate learning about e-learning, management training, whatever you do. So it's a really interesting mix what you bring to the table from an educational perspective, but also with great knowledge about corporate learning. So I think that in combination with everything happening around AI, and I know that has your interest as well, sort of made me ask you for this session, because I really like your opinion there. And I know that you will not that you will be blunt in your opinion. You will not hold back. So I like that as well. So Cris, having said that, can you maybe introduce yourself a bit better?
Thank you, Kasper. Yes, so I'm originally from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I'm not sure if there's anybody here from Brazil. Came to the United States like 2,000 years ago. I don't think I'm going to say when, because that would date me. And I'm currently in Melbourne, Florida, and I am the director of the organizational leadership program for Barry University. And I love technology, absolutely love it. So when AI came on, I wouldn't say when AI started, because as we all know, AI has been on forever. But when AI came to everybody's living room, I jumped into especially to find out how I could use for education and how I could best help my students deal with it appropriately.
Thank you. Then, so Molly, you you prepared an overview of the sessions with with the highlights of them, and then
Yeah.
you can just shortly present that, and then we will respond to that.
Perfect. So, yeah, of course, we'll start with the first session here with Shrivanti, which was around demystifying AI, navigating the myths and truths. So here we kind of gave a recap or a introduction to AI and the different types. I'll read the first point, and then maybe I'll read all 3, and then you guys can respond to them. So the first major point: the creativity of humans will still be needed amongst AI. AI is intelligence. Is not unique, but based on predictions. The second, the data that comes from AI is not necessarily safe yet. More consent systems will be needed, and the attempt of AI is to mimic the millions of neurons of the human brain. So I'll leave that to you too.
So Cris, do you want to respond first?
Yes, right. The first bullet is capturing my imagination. And I'm seeing this from 2 perspectives. The first is that because, and I'm relying on other sessions for that, because in AI everything is amplified, you do need the human person to go in there and say, all right, this is something we will use, this is something we will not use, which means it's, at least for now, AI is not correcting itself. But one thing that really captures my imagination with AI is that we may be able to use our creativity for things that we may be able to use more of our creativity, because maybe the mundane tasks, the easy tasks, even from a learning and development perspective, the stuff we would spend forever, like writing or worrying about the exact wording or structuring things right, that can be done automatically, and we can spend our creativity thinking on more ways to bring. I'm thinking of the second speaker who spoke right after the first session, to bring emotion, to bring experiences. So
Yeah.
let's think about how to bring emotion and experiences and use our creativity for that, and let AI do its thing.
Yeah, I think I understand that completely. So what indeed stood out for me was the discussion we had about how AI works, and basically that Sravanti explained to us that based on a lot of data and pattern recognition and all kind of smart stuff that we have in AI, the only thing that AI actually does is predict what is the next word, or if it's an image, what is the next pixel. And that's really dumb. And on one hand, I knew that, but when she said it that way, I was sort of reminded on that, because if you use AI, if you use ChatGPT and the other tools, I'm very often so impressed by the answers, and sometimes not, but very often I am impressed by the information I get out of it, or sometimes even the insights I get out of it, because it connects things that I wasn't connecting myself. So you start to think of it as a really intelligent thing, while it's not. It proposes to be. So that is really interesting, because it's sort of like a monster in disguise from that perspective. And that is what I think came out for me from Sarvanti's session is, on one hand, the potential is huge, but on the other hand, you need to be aware that it is also not that smart. So you need to keep thinking by yourself. And the other thing that came out of that is that it is basically replicating what is found. So it's not really able to create new stuff. So I spoke to a marketeer the other day, and he said, "Yeah, this is the death of the marketing, because everybody is saying now AI will do that." But it means that every company that uses the same prompt will get the same marketing strategy and the same marketing slogan and the same things there. So that doesn't. So you need to distinct yourself. So that kind of needs creativity, innovation. That is something that is not there. And I'm wondering if it will be ever possible, because of how the technology works, that it does that. So that's sort of what, yeah. So on the one hand, I have sort of a reminder that, okay, AI is not that smart. On the other hand, sort of question. So, okay, what will the future bring with AI, and where are those boundaries? What can it do and what can't it do?
And I think perhaps we need to continue, because AI is going to become smarter, right? Like at this point, it's still rather dumb, but it was even dumber when we started using it just last year. So it's getting better, and it's getting better very fast. So there could be, very likely will be, a time in which some things that we consider creative that we can only do now, the machine is going to be able to do it. So is then, how do we as humans continuously reinvent ourselves to do things that the machine cannot do? On the one hand, that can be terrifying, especially from a, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job perspective. On the other hand, it can be freeing, because it's allowing humans to go where they didn't have time to go before. One thing that really stuck with me and concerned me with Spravanti's presentation was that part about it's not safe yet, and we need more consent systems. And what comes to me is, oh my gosh, just because we could go there, should we have gone there? Because if those consent systems and those protection systems are not there yet, uh, I have very serious concerns about the ethics, and that's something that we can discuss as we talk about some other sessions.
Yeah, but I think that is like that's in the past, because the moment that you ask the question, shouldn't we have not go there? We're already there, and you know that you can never stop it. The same with gene manipulation, all that thing. The moment that technology is available, people will use it. So in my mind, the only thing you also know that bad things will come from it. So the only thing you can do is make sure that there are a lot of good things that are also coming from it, so it evens out.
Correct.
Okay, let's go to the next one, Molly.
Yeah, let's move on. So we'll talk about Nick. I will have to mention too, I'm noticing there was something wrong with my slide template. So the last word on the first line on every slide is repeated. So you just have to ignore that for me. But I'll read them out. So this was from Nick. So first point, learning will not just take place because we created thousands of courses. We don't think, we feel. Therefore, learning requires emotion, which AI cannot replicate. and education is a weird self-serving ritual. That was a quote from Nick.
You want to kick off, Chris?
I wrote down that quote as he was speaking. Education is a weird self-serving ritual. I heard that and I shook my head and I thought, oh, wow, okay, let's unpack that. And I wish Nick were here to unpack it with us. A ritual suggests to me, just the word ritual suggests that it's something that is done for symbolic and culture preservation reasons. A ritual is not really necessary. It is like we're sitting right now, or we're behaving in a certain way or speaking in a certain way for ritualistic reasons, not because it's the only way to do it. So when we say that education is a self-serving ritual, what we're basically saying is that we're doing a lot of things in education for culture preservation reasons. And those things are self-serving, which means that they could be there simply to sustain the machine that is education.
Correct. Yeah.
And that thought, I'm very curious, Kasper, what you think about that, because as an academic, as a professor, as somebody who's been in higher education for a long time and who's very passionate about it, I am also not blind to what we need to do to revolutionize what we have right now.
Yeah, so a great question, because I think indeed he is sort of challenging the education system. Also in the book that he wrote, he does that. And for a part, at least I agree with him, because of course there's a need for education, but it is the way that we educate in and how we educate. So my wife is a primary school teacher, and I sometimes have discussions with her because she teaches kids stuff that they're completely not interested in. So they're like, so by the way, she teaches 4 kids that are in the Netherlands, and they have to teach the language, to learn the language and stuff like that. So she has a variety like between 6 and 12-year-olds, but they have to learn so many things that I would ask, is there an internal need for that? Do they want to need it? Will they use that? So the whole program, but also the way that we do it. So one of the things that Nick said was that, like, basically presenting or just tutoring in that way, like a formal learning approach, is one of the least effective way of learning, because you need to experience, you need to have emotion. And if I think about schools and university, it's not a place where emotions and feelings come up like at the first thing. So at least I think he has a point that we should reconsider it. And I think for a part, it is true that it is a self-serving ritual, because it's something that sustains itself by creating the demand for that kind of learning. It's also the reason for it being there. So he has a point there, but I don't have the alternative. I don't know how you would organize it in a different way. How do you think about that?
I mean, I don't have the alternative either, right? Like if I had, I'd, I don't know, I'd be a very special person that somehow has the answers. Uh, but I do think that it's a problem worth discussing, and discussing it not only in the higher education or primary education levels, but also in L&D and corporate learning.
Of course, if you see an onboarding course, it's also not like it triggers my emotions and attention, and I will forget most of it within minutes. So it is an interesting discussion, but I think that one thing that he didn't touch on, but that I think is also important, next to the fact that learning is not connected to the way we think or the emotions we have. And with that, we know that if you learn something, so there are theories that you learn better if it's connected to music or a certain event. And that is because it taps into your emotions. So at least he has a point there. But I think if I look at schooling, so education, formal education, schools and universities, I think the biggest thing that we did is we made a complete disconnect between the learning environment and the society. And the same thing is happening with corporate learning. So you have like the formal learning from L&D in your academies and everything, and then you have the work you have to do in your workplace. And that is changing now in the corporate world. So we are talking about learning in the flow of work. We're talking about performance support. So we are seeing that learning in corporate is moving towards the workplace. So maybe learning in education should also move more to the workplace of that, and which is society. So I think that the wall we build between society and learning, if we can break that down or at least get some openings in there, I think that would be a great benefit.
My imagination is being captured by that too. I think one last thing that I wanted to say about this is that everything I've heard these last 2 days suggests to me that at least as of now, AI is not going to be truly revolutionary because it's basically very efficiently organizing what humans have been thinking. And humans are biased and tied to their cultures and tied to our ways of doing things. So if we think about from an L&D perspective, if we're used to that old-fashioned course with the little modules in which each module we teach something, well, when we ask AI to do it, AI is going to do the same thing. And then we are going to think that is great. So that's where I think we need to spend some time. Okay, just because AI can create it, that doesn't mean it's truly revolutionary. And to Nick's point, that doesn't really mean people are learning.
No, so I think it was he who said there's already a lot of mediocre content out there. Do not use AI to create more. It could have been something else. I think yes, along those lines. But I think it's really interesting because indeed, what you said in the beginning, that might be the power of AI. If you look at all this, because AI can take away a lot of the tasks that you now spend a lot of time on that are not crucial, that do not make the biggest difference. So like indeed writing for part or organizing or analyzing or whatever. So it would free up your mind to focus on the more important things that have more impact. And if you look at it in that way, it's no different than automation or when we start using personal computers or got access to the internet or things like that. And I'm old enough to have, I've gone through all these stages. So when I grew up, there was no internet, there were no computers. I'm 61. So I actually learned that while it was out there. But maybe AI is from that sense, no different than that. And every time that something like that happens, it's like you get like stories how great it is and how dangerous it is, and probably there's a bit of truth in both. But I think that it's really interesting to sort of see that maybe it's something that actually will help you do your job in a way better way and maybe in less time, and you can focus on other stuff that is way more important. So that could be the conclusion. I'm not sure. We will see in a couple of years. Okay, so anything else on this point, or can we move to the next one, Cris?
Well, there's just one thing also and that is not specific to Nick. It's just a question that came up in Nick's presentation, and then it's being kind of a theme. As you know, one of the things that I teach and that I'm fascinated about is precisely ethics, right? And there was some discussion about using people's personal emails and Slack conversations. Like we were just through that in Haley's excellent presentation just now. Just because it's legal and because it's allowed and because it can be done doesn't necessarily mean we should do it. So perhaps we as L&D professionals or educators or pretty much anybody listening here, perhaps we ought to really spend some quality time taking a look at our moral reasoning and how we make some decisions and what threats there are to moral reasoning, because otherwise we may fall into the trap of, yay, this can be done now, let's do it, this would be great, and we might be ignoring some ethical ramifications of the decisions we're making, which will now be amplified, as other speakers have said.
Yeah, that's a great point. So it's not the law who creates the boundaries. It should be you, is your moral.
Yes.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
We can move on. So this was our fireside chat. What does AI mean for your learning ecosystem? So Kasper, actually, the point you mentioned about the amount of mediocre content, Nelson actually mentioned that, but one of the points on here. So there's a huge amount of mediocre content out there. Don't add more with AI. AI will be able to use employees' performance data to direct them towards the right behavior change, and AI can be used to enhance social contact.
Ah. You want to tackle that first, Kasper?
Yeah, so this for me a bit different because I was in that session myself as speaker. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I really think that something that I never hear, and that I sort of when I started working with my colleague Fide on the book, but also on the roadmap for Easy Generator in the future, we looked at AI in a way to actually connect people, because you can analyze things, you can go through data, which is much too cumbersome to do it for a person, but AI is really good at doing stuff like that. So I do think that, and I don't hear a lot of that, but I think that indeed creating social fiber, social context, social networks with AI, and actually elevating collaboration into things like more like communities of practice and stuff like that, I think there's a great opportunity there. So, and I don't hear a lot about that, but that's one of the things that we did discuss in that session that I really liked, and that is really on top of my mind, because I think it's one of the biggest benefits potentially of AI.
Yes, as I was fascinated in this particular session when we ran the poll, and a lot of people were interested in the social aspects of AI.
Correct.
Um, I'm reminded of, I don't know, an ATD, Association for Talent Development in the US conference that I attended like 2 zillion years ago. And I remember how fascinated I was that they would pick my profile and then connect that profile to the profiles of a bunch of people who were attending. And then there was this map that they would have little pins and put me close to other people who, and that was already AI, by the way. And that was, I don't know, at least 20 years ago. So it's just something to keep in mind here. Um, I think the opportunities to bring people together, both inside organizations for networking, for mentoring, for support, using AI and putting together those profiles can be huge. But of course, we go back to the issue of consent, because we don't want to invade people's privacy. We do want them to consent to that. And we have to be very careful in organizations not to confuse. I'm not sure if this is going to come out right, but uh, real consent and consent under perceived coercion. Because just including something in our employee manuals or employee contracts and having employees sign it doesn't mean you have real consent. It could simply mean people felt coerced to sign it. So that's yet another thing to keep in mind as we think about, yay, this would be great. Now we can get everybody's personal information and connect it in this wonderful system so that the employees can get in touch with each other. What privacy might we be invading? And for that, as to a lot of other things, I'm thinking from a design thinking perspective. Let's pilot. Let's try it with a real group of true volunteers. Those are not people who had to sign some employee manual. Let's see how these things work, and perhaps that would apply to AI in various applications.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Um, yeah, shall we now go to the next one, Molly?
Yeah, sounds good to me. So yeah, the next session, which was our last session of yesterday, was around mastering prompt creation in ChatGPT, how to yield the most effective results. So 3 key points from there. Talk to AI like you would an actual person. It can be similar to a conversation when you chat with AI. Provide content and be specific when creating prompts, and provide feedback and examples when looking for a better response.
Do you want to go, Cris?
Yes, I'm going to connect the first bullet, talk to AI like you would to an actual person. As you know, Kasper, but people watching don't necessarily know, is I'm writing a book. I'm finishing writing a book. I actually finished writing a book, and I'm just in the final editing phases, which I would love AI to do for me, by the way. and it's called Against All Odds, Leadership and the Handmaid's Tale, in which I'm connecting the characters of the Handmaid's Tale series, TV series specifically, to leadership concepts. One thing that I did a lot throughout my writing process was have long, convoluted conversations with ChatGPT. Not because I wanted ChatGPT to give me the answer. As you can imagine, if I had ChatGPT write my book, it would be a career ender. So I was very careful not to do that. Also, ChatGPT was hallucinating like crazy as we were having conversations. But because that allowed me to have a constant companion during the day with whom I could have a conversation. It would not be reasonable or logical for me to have a colleague doing that. I would need to have a coach with me 24/7. ChatGPT was that coach 24/7 with me, who could answer my questions, and then I would say, "Oh no, ChatGPT, you're wrong. What you said is not really true. This character does not really exemplify that." And then there would be these answers that would basically help me think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that my conclusion here would be a bit similar. I love the practicality of this and the tips that we had. And I have to say that I only discovered prompt engineering like a couple of months ago. And it actually, when I at first I was just asking questions to ChatGPT and Bard. When I discovered that if you add context and structure, you get way better response. So that was something I learned over the last year somewhere. I don't know where, but I learned that. So what I recently more learned, and it was also something that was in this conversation, is that those prompts are connected together. And I discovered that. So I made a typo in a question. So I put in the question, and it gave me a wrong response because of my typo. So then I copied and pasted back and corrected the typo. And I said, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know that you meant that." So it was actually connecting the previous question to the next question, and it does that pretty well. And that's also what Kartik touched upon yesterday, is that you can sort of follow up on the question. So you can see it not just as a singular question, but you can actually see it as a conversation. And the question is just the start of that conversation, but go further, ask questions, try to dig in a bit deeper like you would do as a person, and you will get a better response in the end. And also the interesting thing is if you ask the same questions the same time a couple of times, you will not get the same answer over and over again. So that's also, it will differ a bit. So that's really interesting. So if you go to more into like, instead of a question mode, into a conversation mode, it will give you really interesting responses there. So that was, I think, the key takeaway from me here.
Yes, I would agree with that, and I would say that's pretty much what I've been doing. I never worried, even from the beginning, I never worried too much about knowing exactly how to do prompts, but I was treating my interaction with the artificial intelligence as a chat, as really a conversation, and then I was getting pretty interesting results that way. One thing I'm curious about, Kasper, and I'm thinking about Abby right away. Abby, right? Yes. And she was showing the AI capabilities within Easy Generator, which of course I was fascinated about. And what I'm wondering is and that's not just Easy Generator, that's for L&D in general. What can we do inside those tools to minimize the chances that people will reproduce mediocrity? Because the easier it gets to produce, the more likely people are to do it.
Correct.
I'm almost thinking of there's a tool within Easy Generator that allows you to create good learning objectives, for example. So what is it that can be there in the structure that will guide people gently to use AI appropriately?
Yeah, great question. One of the things we actually are working on. So it will be twofold, I think. So one, right now, if you saw the session with Abby, it is just like an open field where you type in your question. So it's just one thing. So I think that the structure should start there. So Kartik showed us like there are like an 8-point approach to get a better prompt. But there are also a simplified version of that. That's like you have like 4 things, like context and a couple of things. So just by asking people, not just ask a question, but ask a question and be specific on these 4 points, like creating like a small form, you already get a better prompt. And the second thing is really closely connected to what we said with that conversation, that we are also thinking that, like we have a tool that will help you build better learning objectives, we also need a tool that will help you build better prompts. And it will be like a conversation. So instead of sending that question directly to ChatGPT or whatever engine we will use, we want to build an engine that sort of makes sure that your prompt is complete by asking you questions. So can you elaborate a bit on this, and how do you mean that, and can you be a bit more specific on that? And once your prompt is like really good, and we can mix that, by the way, with best practices and stuff like that, and improving it even, then we send out a prompt to the AI and to get your information, and that will give you much better results. So I think that on one hand, better AI results is by feeding it better data, and that will be more specific data, company specific data. On the other hand, helping people create better prompts is the other thing that will have a big impact.
Love that. Looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, not yet tomorrow, I'm afraid. So we're just in the concept stages. Yes. Okay, Molly, let's go to the next one. So
Yeah.
today.
Moving today. So why AI video is a secret weapon for L&D teams. So I think this will not be new for most of the people here, but some points that Stefan made. So one, in 5 years, you'll be able to create Hollywood grade videos. Always should think about the original meaning of content, even if it has been altered or created with AI. And you shouldn't try to fool people with AI generated content. It's really important to be transparent.
Are you already using stuff like this, Cris? Or teaching?
No, I was totally fascinated by this tool, and as you can imagine, knowing me, I'm going to go there to explore it pretty much very soon. One thing that when I when I heard also the idea that in 5 years we'll be able to create Hollywood grade videos, on the one hand, that is a little scary because, of course, people could use it nefariously. On the other, think of I can't say this word in English, democratization of it all, in which people who would normally not be able to produce something will be able to produce something. My daughter and my daughter has introduced to us the wonders of really, really bad high school productions that somehow found their way in Amazon and in Amazon Prime, and they're horrendous, and they're very good precisely because they're horrendous and funny. One of the things that I was talking to my daughter about is, on the one hand, there are some quality controls that are not there, and everybody is able to produce these things. On the other hand, just the fact that voices we wouldn't normally hear, we will be able to hear, is just so inspiring to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say that I still, on one hand, I'm very impressed, but this was also one of the comments I saw in the chat. So that hearing a voice of somebody telling you something, explaining you something, do you need the image with that? Especially when it's not a realistic image. So I can also record it myself. So I think it makes it easier. So, and I think especially the translation feature is really powerful. But for this, I'm also a bit wondering. For example, I like the simplicity of it now because you just have a text that you upload, and then. But this is the same when you had the early scenario tools. They were really simple as well. So they were not very rich in the output, but they were really simple. I'm afraid that if you want to create like Hollywood grade videos where multiple people will be interacting in a video that you can create based from text, that becomes so complex in creating a script like that. So it can actually convert it into video, but it will be almost impossible for a normal person to write a proper script and get a proper video. So that's sort of where my concern is. So I think it is pretty powerful as it is now. I'm not certain if it develops further, if that will add value. Maybe the simplicity is the power. So that is sort of what I got from that session, but I really don't know. I love what they do now. I think it's an amazing tool. But I'm really interested to see, and actually I have to use it myself, if they go beyond and go into more like full characters and maybe later on characters that can interact, if I still like it as much. I'm not sure.
And I'm pretty optimistic that they will, or somebody will. In other words, that is coming. One application, and I think one participant asked that question, like, are we going to be able to create scenarios in which people interact with the user, which of course can be a very effective way of teaching. And there was something that was done in my previous university, had some kind of a grant in which they had the system in which the students could interact with real people. They were actually actors that showed up as avatars on screen. It was very effective. The students learned it. It brought emotion into the process. So a lot of the things that we know work, but it was ridiculously expensive. So maybe that kind of tool, if it gets better and if it gets easier, could solve the problem of cost, just thus democratizing the opportunities for people to learn.
Yeah, no, correct. Yeah. So I think it, yeah, and I really love it because it's already out there for like 2 or 3 years on a pretty high level. So for me, it was one of the very first implementation of AI that I thought that was, oh, wait a minute, that is something that I can use and understand. So I think that they are one of the companies that are pretty much, they were ahead of their time and they're now sort of on top of their on the market. So it's really interesting what will happen there next, but it's quite impressive what they achieved over the past few years. Okay, let's go to the last session, Molly.
Yeah, the last session. So this was on ethical implications of AI and L&D. So the 3 key points. AI can improve fairness because it does not get emotional. In AI, mistakes can be amplified, including bias, and prompt engineering can help to mitigate bias.
I think the mistakes can be amplified is the theme of what we've been talking about. So the good can be amplified, the bad can also be amplified. And then in the L&D community, maybe just like I said, it's time for us to take a very good look at our ethical training and ethical development. It's probably also a good time for us to review our sensitivity, our understanding and awareness of our own biases, because no human being is going to be free from them. In fact, Kasper, I think you said something to the sort. It's like, if we're human, we're biased, right? So the other thing that occurs to me is that if you want humans in the L&D community to be able to screen for biases, I guess, or minimize those biases, we need to think of teams of people and diverse teams of people, because no matter how much sensitivity training you go through, you're not going to get away from your biases. What you need is a group of people with different biases so that we can help each other with it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm still sort of processing the session because I was in it myself. But I think that what is really interesting was sort of, it sort of came to my mind while I was in the session asking questions to her, that it is not only the data that is creating the bias, it is also the prompt, but it is also the AI software, because it is learning from the data. And so you should write clean, unbiased code, feed it from day one with completely unbiased content, and then ask completely unbiased questions to get a result. Because there are 3 elements, and I never realized that all 3 have to be completely clean from bias in order to get an unbiased answer. So it's almost undoable.
I would say it's entirely undoable.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, but it's a really interesting one, because on one hand, if it touches on ethical things, so some of the bias is really horrible and it's damaging. But other things, like we had a bit of that discussion as well. If you want to make a distinction between people, it is not discrimination. It's a distinction, and you want to do that sometimes in learning to serve them better. So, and you need to make certain assumptions around your audience, because you don't teach one-on-one, you teach in groups, which by definition makes it that you sort of create a general image of that group to teach them. So, and with that, you will have some biases in there. So that is something which is really interesting. So it sort of triggers a lot of questions, also questions that go beyond basically AI and bias, but just bias and learning in general, which is of course also an interesting topic.
I think taking all this into full circle, Kasper, because we started talking about that. You said we can't stop it, right? It's there. The cat is out the bag. We're building the ethical components of this airplane as we fly it. So to me, the question is, what do we, everybody watching this, everybody interacting with us today, what is our ethical responsibility to impact this, even if in a small way? Because we do have that responsibility, even if we're not the people who are the CEOs of ChatGPT or whoever is
Well,
there
I
now.
think that one of the things that Haley also said, it is your personal responsibility. So you just need to be aware of it. And the moment
Mhm,
that you are aware of it, you can actually act on it. So I
mhm.
think different than your personal bias, which you have, and you just have to be aware of it so it doesn't hurt anybody and you steer it in the right direction. So that is, it's an interesting one. Okay, so those were all the sessions. So, Cris, if you sort of look back at that and then turn around and look forward, so what do you think? So, what will all this bring us?
Oh my gosh. So from a human creativity standpoint, I'm very excited about the possibilities this brings. I'm excited about all the space that I now have to do things that before I would be, I don't know, before I might, as a professor, be spending forever creating a simple quiz. Now I can, hey, ChatGPT, not ChatGPT, but AI does that. And then there's even this little block that I can put on Easy Generator automatically. So now I don't have to worry about that stuff. So I'm excited about the time that is freed for the human brain to do more creative things. I'm scared that we are moving too fast and that consent issues, privacy issues, uh, all sorts of ethical issues haven't been sufficiently discussed. And that can be amplified in a very bad way.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, and how do you see the impact of AI and learning and education? Do you already have ideas on that, or is that like an open?
Yeah, so at first, when ChatGPT just came out and we started coming to grips with it, professors all over the place were terrified. In fact, many still are, because oh my gosh, this is going to be cheating city. City. The students are just going to go to ChatGPT and put my entire essay on it. Which by the way, it has happened, and it still happens, and it happens quite a bit. What I have found with my students is that the more time I spend helping them understand how to use these tools to enhance their creativity, as in having conversations with the tool, as in using it to organize their own thoughts, then they're amplifying their creativity rather than, putting it in a drawer and ignoring it. The good news is that there are parts of this that are truly freeing. For example, a student who before might really struggle in academia because maybe that student doesn't have the background to write very well. All of a sudden, writing very well doesn't become too important anymore, which of course is probably terrifying a lot of my English professor friends, but or whatever language. But the reality is, if a machine can organize my thoughts into writing them very well, is that a bad thing? We could argue that it's as bad as the calculator helping me add things up, or the GPS taking me places. It's
Correct.
a tool, and maybe we need to concentrate on different things.
But it's interesting because if you draw the line, so if I look at my own experience, so my handwriting is more than horrible. I have difficulty reading it back myself. So so we have a rule at Easy Generator. Basically, if you give me paper, it doesn't count. So I need everything in the computer. But when I was like 25, so around that age, I was teaching unemployed people to teach accountants to bookkeeping on a computer, and we used material that was so horrible. So I started writing more and more my own material. And then the publisher asked me, "Can you create like a series of textbooks on that?" So I said, yeah, but how are you doing that? You have to write it, and then we have editors who are actually. I said, well, the only way for me to say yes is if you give me a computer, because I didn't have a personal computer, but I need a computer. Otherwise, I can't do that. So I actually got my first IBM IT then with like a 10 megabit hard disk. It was like incredible. What do you do with all that space? I remember that. But that was like such a moment that technology enabled me to do something I wasn't able to do before that. And the same is with my English. So I'm not a native speaker. And
Mhm.
although I have improved a bit over time, if I write, my writing is far from perfect. So I use Grammarly and other
Mhm.
tools to improve my writing for the grammar, for the sentence, for the construction of the sentences. And in fact, maybe AI is just that. It's another tool that will help you improve your productivity, do it better, and do it faster. So
And as long as we're using it to um, boost our creativity, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that from an education perspective. It's great. Um, it's just not making sure, but also encouraging students to think about all that extra time in which you can really think something amazing. Now, how are you going to use it? How are you
correct.
going to use that time? And I don't care if you can build the perfect paragraph and you know where to put the commas because, hey, Grammarly does that. It's fine.
Yeah.
Anything that Grammarly can do, I don't care if you can do or not because, hey, there's a machine for that. That's absolutely fine.
But maybe for education and for corporate learning probably goes the same. It will take away because if ChatGPT can just give the answer, so is it worthwhile learning? So the answer is
And that's
maybe it's not. So maybe and it's something that I think we need to look at where the value in learning is. And I just had it. Well, you wrote a book yourself, but you wrote it by yourself, I think, correct? Just your.
yes.
I had the privilege to write it together with someone, so with Vaidehi. And we are very different persons. So she has like so a huge theoretical knowledge. I'm much more a practical guy, and she's from India. I'm from the Netherlands. So she's like this big, I'm that big. So we couldn't be more different. But we are a great team, and we actually created something together that neither of us has done could have done by him or herself. But the interesting thing was that both of us learned so much while writing it because the collaboration, having the discussions, or challenging each other's on each text, or are you certain on this and that, and how do you come to that conclusion, being really specific. So I think that we made like not one, but maybe three, four, or five steps in the level of our thinking on employee generated learning. And it's something we completely didn't anticipate. We just thought we write down the experience of the last 10 years and that's it. And it turned out to be something completely different. So the fact that we were collaborating and putting our thoughts together on paper or in a computer, that by itself was a learning experience, was like awesome. And I think that maybe we need to look at that. So it is not that much in the words that you write, but it is in the process you go through. And I think maybe we should focus more on that with learning and education than just on the facts and the numbers and the data.
Yes. I completely agree with you. And by the way, I noticed that as soon as I noticed students using AI or ChatGPT specifically to answer things, by the way, they were using other things before. They were using so-called tutoring sites. Like cheating was not invented with the age of AI. But what I noticed is that once I changed the assignments into now let's talk about your experiences, your life, what's happening to you, what's happening in your organization, I stopped having problems with ChatGPT magically. So perhaps the issue is what we're asking people to do, not whether, because if we ask people to do something stupid and meaningless and they're busy, guess what they're going to do? Try to cut corners. You know,
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, so and maybe it's a nice example, but I used it before. But I actually have hearing aids because I damage my ears by listening to too loud music. And I recently got a new pair, and it's Bluetooth enabled. And if my phone goes, I can just click on the left one, and I can answer the call because it also has a microphone. But I programmed the right button to ChatGPT.
Huh.
And it actually means that if I activate that, and for example, if I play a pub quiz and I read the question out, ChatGPT will give me the answer in my ear. So I, I can now win everything. The only, the
Fascinating.
only the only problem is that it will give me the answer and it will keep on talking. So I can't figure out without talking to it, but it's really interesting because it brings knowledge that close, and it sort of changes the way that you look at knowledge. So what do you need to actually be successful in your life? And it's something we know. So knowledge is not that important. So skills are way more important. And it's something we know in education, something we know in L&D. But at the same time, it's so much easier just to push facts, to push information. So and it's something that I talk to like, well, a lot of learning managers. And recently I started adding a question that I ask all of them. So if you critically look at the content that you create in your company, so what kind of percentage is like fact-based, is knowledge-based, is knowledge-driven, and which part is like skills-based? And all of them, by far, the majority is maybe 90% or more, it is still really factual knowledge, knowledge-based, and not skills-based. And we know that we need to change that, but it's harder to do. So the easy way out is not to do it. And I think that AI can actually push it in that direction because the it becomes less and less useful to push that information because it is there and it will be there more and more and more. So we need to go beyond that, and we need to go, how do you use that knowledge? How do you apply that knowledge? And how do you get better at your job by improving your skills? So I think it will be a push for the better, but it will be hard because it's not that easy to do that. So I think that is one of the things that I look at AI that could be the most beneficial thing, that we actually improve learning. But as I said, so where I see in corporate learning some windows opening towards the workplace, that is what I still don't see happening in education. And I think it's really, really necessary because at Easy Generator, we are now like with 200 people or something like that. And most of those people who start, they are fresh from university. We have a lot of young starters. And the thing is, they are really smart and they know a lot, but they can't do anything. You have to basically teach them everything because they are not trained or work to work actually in the real world in a company like Easy Generator. So they lack all those skills. So that is what you have to do. And they are super smart and have super much knowledge, but those skills, a lot of the skills you need to be successful in a company like us, they lack. So you need to train them from the bottom. So that's really interesting because I think you need more of a mix there.
And what you said earlier, we need more of a conversation between education and the industry. Why is it that all those young people are coming to you without the skills that they need to succeed in an organization?
Yeah, correct.
One note that I have in here is this: we are being given a precious gift, which is time. What are we going to do with it? Are we simply going to like fire a whole bunch of people and then make them equally busy? Or are we going to actually, as L&D professionals, who was such an important piece of organizations, we do such important work, whether we do it in organizations or in universities, what will we do with our extra time? I think that's the question that will define whether we're going in a really cool direction for humanity or just a dangerous one.
Yeah. I think that's a great note to end this session with. Thank you for that.